on a podcast together, Rebecca.
Wow.
It's happening.
Just like it was like 15 years ago.
That's our theme, right? This is just a traversing back through time all day today, which sets up my first question. I always ask my guests to tell the story of how we met. And typically I have a rock solid memory about this stuff. And this one's fuzzy for me, so I'm counting on you here.
So I know we've known each other since like 2007, 2008. I actually just went into my blog in the archives and I typed in your name. So the first time I live blogged you was at Bar Camp 2007. You were on a panel of professional bloggers and it was about monetization, so I was super interested.
Okay. All right. Well, that's probably it then. It would have likely been that weekend. If not, then would we have attended the bar camp a year previous to that? Or is that likely the first one that we both attended?
That's the first one I live blogged. I think, yeah, we were probably going to them before that though.
I think so, because I don't know if I was on a panel in the first bar camp I attended. I think I was a wallflower meeting people like yourself probably, but not. Anyway, that dates us a little bit. That's 18 years, 17, 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. All right. Yeah. I have less pigment in my hair than I did back then. That's for sure. I spoke to Shane Gibson on the last podcast since my rebrand here to On Air Jordan. And it was the same for us. It was like, I know it was an event. Mm-hmm. It was probably that I knew exactly which event, but he was like, I'm going to say it was a bar camp or a tweet up, or that's just how it goes. It's been a while, right?
Yeah. I was much more social back then. Much more social and networking and getting out of the house. But that was the key to like the beginning of the success of everything that's been built in Web 2.0 and on our careers ever since was like those in-person little get-togethers and gatherings and yeah.
You're absolutely right. Like our networks, like I would say I have a very strong network, but the real strength of it was built all the way back then. And it's the same people. And that sets up my second question, because I recently joined Blue Sky and it felt a lot like joining Twitter back in 2007 or 6 or whenever it was I joined, maybe 2008 for Twitter. But anyway, it's back in those times. And yeah, it's almost like starting over again. And the first people I'm looking for are probably the first people that I followed on Twitter all those years ago as well. Because it's like, it's a fresh start. I want those people first. Like I'm going through the people that you follow to find the people that I want to follow, if that makes sense. But I don't need to tell you about Blue Sky. You're literally writing the book on it right now. So that's my first question. Let's talk about Blue Sky. It's experiencing a moment. You're writing the book on it. Teach me, because I'm brand new to this.
Yeah. I've been following some Blue Sky lists of like people from Twitter. Like it's literally just called that, from the early days. As you said, we want to reconnect with the folks that we first connected with back then and the way it was back then. So the Blue Sky book, Blue Sky for Dummies. So it's the world-renowned For Dummies brand, which I've been a technical editor for them for a few years, which I love technical editing. I've done Instagram for Business, digital etiquette, soft skills, all these different books that I've edited. And this is my first foray into being an author in the For Dummies series. So that was fun to be welcomed into that fold in itself. But yeah, the main topic is Blue Sky. So the latest because there's social networks popping up all the time, but the latest and greatest social network, 32 million users now. And it's just been a wonderful experience to get back to those earlier days of connection on social media, the social and social media, and really they really make it kind of work for your audience, because they don't have the same algorithms as Instagram, Facebook, as Meta or as X or Twitter or things like that. So you really are being more social, which I know I just mentioned I'm not that social anymore, but you have to be more social online.
There's a difference. I think, we don't show up in as many in-person events maybe for the sake of networking as we used to back then. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you are a power networker online. That's, that's what you do, right?
I need to be.
Yeah, exactly. I always start with that how we met question, and then, really get the podcast rolling before I read the bio of the person that I'm speaking to. And so this is the point where I'm going to put you into context for everybody so that my mom realizes the kinds of guests that I can get on my podcast, you know? I'm only kidding. Of course, my mom knows who you are. She enters all your contests.
She's won one before, yeah.
Yeah, and fair and square, too. And not for a lack of entering, that's for sure. Okay, here we go. You strap in. I'm going to power through this. Rebecca built her first website in 1997, has been blogging about life in BC since 2004 on miss604.com, the longest running woman-owned independent professional blog in Western Canada. Let that sink in, everybody. The most award-winning local, national, and international accolades of a local blog. Also, literally wrote the book on blogging to drive business, a technical editor for 5 titles in the For Dummies series, including, of course, the Blue Sky for Dummies that we spoke about. Available for pre-order now. BC's Top 100 Women of Influence, Best Blog in Western Canada, won over 30 blog awards, Variety International Media Award for your work with Variety, the children's charity, and you've served on, in the last 20 years, you've served on the boards of
a couple boards.
Canuck Place Children's Hospice, BC Entertainment Hall of Fame, Stanley Park Ecology Society, Variety, the children's charity, Dan's Legacy Foundation. I could go on all day. But that's the kind of people I can get on my podcast, everybody.
I've been a little busy.
Sure. That's a long history of blogging and social media, and we've gone through so much since then. What, in all of that time, and in particular looking at today, what thoughts, concerns, bright spots do you have about the state of social media now?
State of social media. Oh, Blue Sky is definitely a bright spot. So in metaphorical and literal terms, it's a bright spot. Just for getting back to that connectivity, wiping away the algorithms, creating your own algorithm with lists and feeds and all the options there. But for me, so blogging, why I've been with it for 20 years now. I started before social media existed in the form that it is today, so 2004. And every 5 years or so, someone would say, blogging's dead. What are you going to do? And the next 5 years would go by, blogging's dead. What are you going to do? And John and I had a podcast, and podcast died in 2010 or 2011. And now podcasting has been back for the last decade. It took a little breather, but things come and go, things fluctuate so much. I stay tried and true to my blog, which is my home base. So if X goes away, which I'm not posting on there anymore, or if Facebook goes down or something, I have my blog, which is my home base. I control it. I control the information there. So I'm always going to be and also it's my entire business. So, but yeah, no matter what social media networks come and go, like I'm not on TikTok really, so I pick and choose which networks will serve me for the best purpose and the best use of my business and my time and getting the word out. Highlights of blogging, number one has been the charitable impact, being able to use my blog and my voice there to raise funds and then also partner with. So with Canuck Place, I've been an official blogger of Canuck Place for at least a decade now, 2010. Oh, that's more than a decade. That's 14 years, 15 years. So just having that platform. So highlights of social media, the charitable impact and support of my community. Lowlights, all of the misinformation that can happen on social, cyberbullying over the years. You know, as a woman on social media, you can see in the social media landscape some things that we have to go through. Yeah, those are the lowlights, but the highlights are definitely why I'm still doing it and I'm still around and I can see the impact of everything.
Once upon a time, it was common for a person to be a professional blogger. And a lot of us back then might have considered ourselves professional bloggers, but it was like because a company was going to hire us to write something. You took a personal blog and built a media empire out of it. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think that's exactly what's happened. You said blogs came and went, blogs died 5 times over, everybody kept saying, but for you it didn't. You stuck it out and you've been massively successful. And I'm wondering, what do you attribute that success to?
I think just sticking it out, just staying with it. The last day job I had was in 2008. So when I first jumped into it, John and I started 64 Media, which is a WordPress website development firm. In 2008, I couldn't jump into being a professional blogger. It was the 2010 Olympics that gave me my biggest push, my biggest platform, my biggest bump in ad revenue where I could say, okay, I can now do this blogging officially full time. So during the 2010 Olympics, I did, I think, 120 blog posts in 2 weeks, just focusing on the events, things happening around town, and just that positioned myself as an online authority go-to for events and things happening in Vancouver, and that allowed me. So that's the number one, I think the number one factor that led to me being able to be a professional blogger was back in 2010, the Olympics, my coverage there. Since that time, it's been just staying at it, keep doing what I'm doing, using different social networks to, again, drive that traffic in, adding, I added in recent years, doing more like to my media kit and partnerships and sponsorships with companies, adding Instagram reels or various other things, removing some networks, adding some new networks, newsletters, starting a newsletter subscription. But again, yeah, that number one success has just been keeping at it. And I don't want to sit here and be like, you need to write 15 blog posts a week and that's how you become a successful blogger. I have a few things that I do every week. I do a weekend event list, I do a monthly event list. And then other than that, it's keeping up with the PR connections I've made over the years, events, community news, being out in my community and writing about things that I also am personally interested in and want to write about. I don't cover everything. I don't cover news. It's staying true to me and what Rebecca wants to see on her blog. And that's how I've kept at it, how I've kept a passion for it and not being discouraged because I'm still doing it for myself and what I want to put out in the world.
Those event listings, by the way, are the first place that I go if I'm looking for something to do on the weekend with my kids.
Good.
It's like, well, I know what I want to, where I'm going to look to find that.
So I hear I've heard from young adults who've said, my parents used to use your event list for date nights and now I'm using it for their date nights. Or I'm like, a whole generation has used my event list. It's really nice to hear, but yeah, it's
That's
dating me
something.
a bit.
That is something. How much of the business now is sponsorship and how much is still consulting? Are you still building WordPress websites through 64 Media, by the way?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a couple of different streams of income. The blog is number one. I'd say it's 70%. So that's through sponsorships and partnerships. So that's what 70%. The other 30% is my WordPress website clients. I've got a base there of building or maintaining or doing SEO or social media consulting, content marketing consulting. So that's about 30%. And then somewhere in between there are a few other buckets like writing a book about Blue Sky or editing a book, or I do a monthly column for Megaphone magazine as well. So that's a small little portion, but that's for my heart. That's for my community. So
Sure. You mentioned John a couple of times, and while the brand is Miss 604, and from the outside looking in, obviously the brand is entirely built around you, but those of us who are insiders know that the Bollwitts come as a pair. And so I've got a question in here where I wanted to, I'd love to hear the story about how you met John and how that came to be. You mentioned the podcasting and things like that. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating story and I think people would love to hear that.
very, very long story short, we met online. So it was about 2004. And there was, so again, before social media, there was like a photo sharing site. And if you went to that website, you could upload your albums. And so, yeah, even think of Facebook albums or Instagram before Instagram. And on
Are we talking about Flickr? Is it
Nope.
Flickr? Not Flickr.
A different
Okay.
one. It's gone now,
All
and I
right.
don't know if it's associated with something bad now, so I don't want to say the URL.
Don't.
I won't. But on that site, the latest photos from any person would show up, latest uploads, and we literally met randomly through that. So I think either he liked a photo of mine or I liked a photo of his, and we became contacts. And then after becoming contacts and following each other, it led to messages, then direct messages, and then emails, and then phone calls, and then months and months later, and he's from Iowa. So again, that's an important point because I was in Surrey at the time. He is in Iowa. And after a while and months of chatting and just developing this friendship, he was going to be in New York at the same time I was going to be in Boston. I did live in Boston at one point, and I was going back to meet some roommates. And we're just like, do you want to meet up? So technically we met in person at the train station in Boston. And that was the moment we both knew we had to turn our lives upside down and turn it into something else and be together, whatever. So he went home to Iowa, I went home to Surrey. I moved to Vancouver. He moved from Iowa to Vancouver, and it's been 20 years since that first meeting at the train station, and yeah, we built a life together here.
Ha! Take that, dating apps. Liking a photo, becoming a 20-year marriage, and you're back and forth on the holidays to Iowa. And anytime I hear Iowa, I think of my favorite movie, Field of Dreams.
We played some catch there. We played some baseball
Well,
there.
you built it, and he came. So there you have it, everybody. I have a couple of fun questions scheduled for us, and the first one is an absolute beauty. This is actually, did I tell you that it is going to be Vancouver landmarks? That I'm going to ask you to blind rank 5 Vancouver landmarks. There's no time limit on this one. The next one is timed exercise, and it occurs to me I have to go grab my stopwatch for that. But I will name 5 Vancouver landmarks in random order, and I want you to place them in order from 1 to 5, 1 being the best, 5 being the least cool as far as your assessment. And you don't know what's coming, so you have to kind of guess based on your opinion of them as they come. And you can rationalize your responses. We want to hear, why you've arrived at the conclusion that you have. So that sets it up both for you and for the viewers.
Okay. I'm like getting all ready. I have my hand. I'm like, okay.
Yes.
Game show mode.
So, Rebecca Bollwitt, blind ranking 5 Vancouver landmarks or tourist destinations. The first one, Dr. Sun Yat-sen Classical Chinese Garden.
Oh, okay. So what's the ranking like out of 5 or 10 or in an order?
1 to 5. You're right. There's going to be 5. You have to choose 1 to 5 where it is on the list.
And can I adjust them later?
Nope. You got to lock them in.
No. Oh, no.
You can express your regret later.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It's beautiful there, and I love taking photos. I've gotten more into my photography lately. I'll say it's 4 or 5, because I think I'll probably have 3 that are near and dear to my heart.
You think so, but
I
you don't know what's coming.
One will be further. Okay.
Okay, right. The Capilano Suspension Bridge.
Okay, I'll put that at 5 then. It's gorgeous and lovely, but I would say when I write about it, some feedback I hear is it's some cost prohibitive for visitors. For locals, if you go once, you can get an annual pass. So that's like once for a year, it turns into an annual pass, so that's great. But I don't get there as often, but it is gorgeous. I'll say it's 5. So Sun Yat-sen 4, Capilano 5.
Okay, now I'm going to throw you a curveball then, because the next one is the Lynn Canyon or the Lynn Valley Suspension Bridge.
Oh, okay, then 3. There you go, because it's the free version of a gorgeous suspension bridge in a forested area. Yeah.
It just occurred to me that my list is completely unfair. But then again, it's also reflective of the choices that you've made up to this point. The next...
because I've left the top 2, right?
Yeah. Well, the next one is the steam clock in Gastown.
I knew that one was coming. I was saving spot 5 for that one.
You've said all I needed to hear. It's going into the number 2 spot, regrettably.
Justin McElroy is going to kill me.
Yeah. Well, that's where we are. Why? Tell us why. Why would the steam clock automatically be in the number 5 spot of everything we've talked about so far?
There is so much history in this town and so many cool things to see and so many natural things to see. And it's neat as a visitor, but as someone who used to work in Gastown as well, and you have to walk through the throngs of tourists, this isn't against tourism. This isn't against visitors to our city. Other things are better things to look at and admire and appreciate in this city. In and of itself, it's a lovely piece of mechanical steam, but it's from the 70s. I think that's one of the main things, is that it's from the 70s. It's not from like the 1890s.
Isn't it also electric? Isn't
it's
it
also,
like a little...
not quite steam. Yeah, so
it's a boiler. It's a little electric boiler.
Yeah, so it's not really like an old thing. It's not really a steam thing. Yeah, so I would put that at 5. I was keeping that spot open. I should have I have regret.
See, that's okay. That's fair. The last one in my list, and it has to occupy the number one spot now. We'll see how you feel about this. The girl in a wetsuit statue in
This one?
Stanley Park. How well do I know you? I didn't put a question in our pre-show notes about this, but I did
No.
intend to mention that I go to Stanley Park a lot. Like I do laps of Stanley Park on my bike, both on gravel and on road. I go there a lot, and I know very, very few people who are there more often than me. And you're number one on that list. Maybe explain why we love Stanley Park so much.
Yeah. So the shirt is from Make Vancouver, and it's actually a mermaid, which is what people think the girl in a wetsuit. So she's
Right.
she's not a mermaid, a bronze statue. You can see the diver goggles on her head. So if I'm saying, so I'm perfectly content with something in Stanley Park being number one. I like going there king tides or super high tides, super low tides, because she's on this giant rock that's at least, I don't know how many meters. It's at least two of me. So let's say it's quite tall. And at super low tide, I can walk up to the base of the rock and she's way up there. But at a high tide, she's sitting right on the water. And it's just really cool to see. There are other monuments in Stanley Park that I would rank higher, but the park in and of itself being number one is, yeah, it's always going to be number one on my list. Conveniently, I also put this book right next to me in case you asked anything about Stanley Park. Highly recommend Secrets of Stanley Park by Gene Barman to learn more about, this is the Forgotten Family, the indigenous families and folks who lived there before it was turned into a park. So quick shout out to that. But yes, I'm in Stanley Park almost every day.
I could have said Suash Rock, but I thought it was way funnier to use the girl in a wetsuit statue.
That I chose this shirt too. I'm like, I'm going to pick something super Vancouver.
We could call that serendipity, but it's not. I always think things like this it's not even a coincidence. It's like, I just knew. I knew. And there you have it. Right?
There you go.
That's your brand, right? I see you walking through the park, taking photos of her all the time, and I think of you when I ride by her all the time for that reason. Yeah, that's fun. Okay, I am going to put 30 seconds on the clock, and I want you to name as many defunct social media platforms as you can think of in 30 seconds. Go.
Okay, Pounce, Jaiku. Because I know those were original like Twitter things. Pounce and Jaiku. What was the loopy one on for Twitter? Fleet, where you had fleets. Vine, that one. Vine. There was something to do with Peach too. Is Delicious and Dig, are those still around? I'm just trying to think of the little share buttons I used to have on my site. Google Plus.
R.I.P. Google Plus.
I don't even know. I can't. Oh, I'm over time.
That's okay. That in and of itself is a metaphor for the state of things, right? Is that first of all, there are loads of them, and they've faded into, our lost memories. Like, I would have said things like Plurk. Did you say Plurk? I can't remember.
Mm-mm.
Anyway,
no.
Who can count? We tried them. They came, they went. Some have stayed that probably shouldn't have. I weep for the loss of Twitter. And we can call it a loss because it's not called that anymore, which is apt, I think, because it's not what it once was.
Mm-hmm. And it's tough because that was my biggest audience. So I needed to walk away from that for moral and ethical and everything reasons. So that has an impact for my business, for my site stats, for all of that. But it's something I've chosen to just cut off at the head and go. So my focus right now is rebuilding and building on Blue Sky and on other networks and focusing on my blog. But yeah, I think that one hurt the most, that just that community and that culture was lost there.
What other platforms are you actively building on?
I should be doing more with email and newsletter. I just kind of let it happen. I just kind of let it go. I don't actively build into it. Yeah, so just on Meta, on Blue Sky. Blue Sky is my number one focus right now, just to see the potential that's there. I've been checking my site referrals, my acquisition sources on Google Analytics. Blue Sky is now in the top 10. Back in October, it sneaked into the top 20, so I've been very active in trying to get it in there. Oh, Threads as well, but that's part of the Meta universe. But Blue Sky for sure. I've been trying to get that into my top 10 acquisition sources, and it's there now. So it is converting. So for marketers and folks out there wanting to get those conversions from Blue Sky, they happen because also the links aren't throttled by an algorithm on Blue Sky.
Right. Just professional curiosity, which is growing faster between Threads and Blue Sky for you?
Blue Sky for sure for me. Threads had a moment, but in terms of my followers, I reached 10,000 within a year on Threads, and it has plateaued. So I've been at 10.6, 10.5. It just goes up and down and plateaus. It used to be like a straight hockey stick kind of growth, and it's plateaued. So now Blue Sky is the one with the most growth and uptick at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Incidentally, for me, Twitter was my largest audience, but I kind of walked away from using it long before I did it for ethical reasons. I just kind of lost interest. So it didn't hurt as much. And I'm still parked there almost as like in defiance of everything that's happened. I don't want to give up. Not that anybody cares about my namespace, but I'm just like, parking. I'm an inactive user under duress. And now, of course, I don't know if it's obvious, but my biggest audience is definitely LinkedIn. If someone is visiting our fair city for just one weekend, what does Miss 604 recommend that they do? What are the must-sees in Vancouver if you're just here for a weekend?
So I'm going to say that there's three things that we've had lots of family visit from the States and all over, and I get this question quite often. Mountains, forest, and ocean. So if you can get in those three things, which Vancouver is famously known for. So in the mountains, get up somewhere, go to the sea to sky gondola, or Lynn Valley. I'll give it more love now that I ranked it 5 when it shouldn't have been 5. Oh, not Lynn Valley, Capilano, Lynn Valley. Anywhere in the mountains, go to the mountains and then go to the sea. So whether that is on a False Creek ferry going across False Creek to Granville Island, or a sea bus, or some type of water whale watching tour or something, or kayaking in Deep Cove, get on the water. So mountains, water, and then forest. Stanley Park, number one place you need to go. There's so much whether you want to go through the 20 kilometers of forest trails or around the seawall and say hello to some harbor seals, my buddies, or check out Indigenous History to Lacey Tours. Candace Campo and her company operate in Stanley Park. They have an app. They do Talking Trees tours. They do various tours about Indigenous history in Stanley Park. So that's probably my number one. If I get to choose, my number one thing to do a tour with Lacey Tours, and then all of those other things, forest, mountain. And then aside from that, and I forgot to mention the actual city itself, checking out local businesses, restaurants, coffee shops, and there's a couple I could direct you to, but yeah.
Do you have a favorite restaurant? I know it's tough it's like choosing your favorite child, but do you have a favorite?
So there's some I go to often, and there's some that I absolutely loved and they're no longer around. And I don't know if you have time for this story, but I was calling it the Bollwitt curse for a while, because John and I would walk by a place for years, and say, we need to go there. We would finally go there, and within a month it would close. And this has happened 5 times. I was telling this to someone from the West End BIA, and she's like, what's your current favorite restaurant? And at that time I said Good Dogs, which was a vegan hot dog spot on Robson and Jervis. And she said, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but Good Dogs is closing. Good Dogs closed. So that was my last favorite restaurant, was Good Dogs. Other than that, I recently, or in the last 2 years, I guess, went vegetarian. So Mila plant-based, To Live For Bakery, Erin Ireland's bakery. I don't live in East Vancouver, I'm in the West End, but I travel there at least once a week for To Live For.
That's a good shout out. We'll tag Erin Ireland. If you were the mayor of Vancouver, or let's say maybe if you had a magic wand, what changes would you make to the city?
Housing. Affordable housing for everyone. That's the number one thing. It would always be, well, hopefully not always be the number one thing that needs fixing, but yeah, housing. I don't want to talk politics or get into politics, but housing number one, and then number 2, mental health support, and then everything else that comes after that.
Right. And it's an excellent question. And I didn't mean to make it political, but it is the answer, though. You're absolutely right. It's the thing that needs change the most, and the thing that maybe has changed the most since, those 17 years ago that we met too. What local businesses or causes do you want more Vancouvers or Canadians to support?
Businesses or causes. Well, right now there's a big Buy Canadian, Shop Local, Buy BC movement. So going to the Buy BC government directory is a great resource. Anybody there? A lot of Indigenous businesses as well. I wrote about some Indigenous businesses that you can shop and support. And I'm also sponsored the BC Achievement Awards, and one of their awards is Indigenous businesses, and they've been going for at least a dozen years, and they have lists and lists and lists, everything from food to books to clothing. So yeah, support Indigenous businesses and local shops. Did I answer that? I feel like there's some
Yeah,
other parts of that
well, now
question.
let's get specific. What
Okay.
specific ways do you shop these days, particularly given everything that's transpired in the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, so looking for those Canadian labels by BC labels, just making that choice. I was at Safe, my mom's Safeway, local Safeway with her, and she was turning around labels to read labels and product of made in, and so that was really nice to see as well. Clothing like this is from Make, Make on Granville Island. Everything from your transportation choices to your clothing choices to food. So I was mentioning some of those Indigenous Business Awards recipients. One of them is Rad Relish out of the Okanagan. I now put that on almost everything that relish might go on. So anything from relish to, yeah, to especially if you're making a tourism choices and avoiding crossing the border for tourism this upcoming season, spring and summer. Think local, think BC, go to the Indigenous Tourism BC website, find some tour operators and resorts and destinations. There's a lot being offered around BC.
Where in BC are you traveling to in the coming months?
My dream trip is to go back to Clahoose Wilderness Lodge in Desolation Sound. I don't think I will get there this season, but we're looking at Sunshine Coast is very near and dear and close to my heart. So we'll probably be back on the Sunshine Coast in a
Mine
few
too, as
weeks.
it turns out.
Yep.
I was in Desolation Sound in May of last year.
Nice.
For anyone listening to this that may or may not be familiar with the Miss 604 brand, how can they support your brand? Where should they find you, follow you, click your links, etc.?
Yep. So miss604.com is my website. I am super exclusive just for your podcast, Jordan. I'm launching a new theme in the coming weeks. I got worked with an awesome local artist who's been my Blue Sky Threads friend for at least a year or so. I've known her work, so she has created a new banner for my site. I have a new theme launching. So miss604.com will have all of my blog posts, news, events, things to do in Vancouver, community info, nonprofit news. And then Blue Sky at miss604.com on Blue Sky, because you can get a custom domain handle there. And then every other network that you are on, I'm probably there as Miss604.
There you have it. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you making the time. It's been a lot of fun. And I'll say the same thing I said to Shane. It's like I almost have to do this so I can catch up with my old friends. So I'm really grateful for you setting the time aside and for everything that you've shared. And I will let you know when this is ready. I'll start tagging you on all of those platforms you just mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much
All right.
for inviting me. And yeah, this is great.
Thanks, Rebecca.